Carolina Brando only entered the Cornfield maze to humor her friends, but when she gets truly lost, she stumbles upon more than a way out. A stranger, a spark, a second chance. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. Carolina Brando stared at the Cornfield maze entrance with a frown on her face. At 27, she had better things to do than wander through some country fair attraction. The bright afternoon sun beat down on the dusty fairgrounds of Vale Sereno, making her wish she was back in her air-conditioned apartment in the city. "Come on, Carolina, it'll be fun," her friend Marta urged, practically bouncing with excitement. "You've been moping around for weeks now. This is exactly what you need." Carolina sighed. Her friends meant well, but they didn't understand. 2 months ago, she'd lost both her boyfriend and her job in the same week. Richard had ended their 3-year relationship with a text message, and then her boss had called her into his office to tell her the company was restructuring. Her life had fallen apart, and a country fair wasn't going to fix that. "I don't see how getting lost in corn is going to help me find a new job," Carolina muttered, adjusting her sunglasses. Her other friend, Eleanor, linked arms with her. "Not everything is about work. Remember fun. Remember smiling. We're worried about you." Carolina felt a pang of guilt. Her friends had driven 2 hours from the city just to drag her to this harvest festival. The least she could do was try to enjoy it. "Fine," she said, forcing a smile. "I'll go into your stupid maze." Marta clapped her hands. "That's the spirit. But here's the deal, you have to go in alone." "What? Why?" "Because," Elena said with a mischievous grin, "we're trying to get you to be more adventurous. Take a risk, live a little." Carolina rolled her eyes but found herself walking toward the entrance of the maze anyway. "How long is this supposed to take?" "About 30 minutes if you don't get lost," Marta called after her. "We'll meet you at the exit. And no using your phone for directions." With a final glance back at her friends, Carolina stepped into the tall corn. The stalks rose high above her head, instantly cutting off her view of the fairgrounds. All she could see was the narrow dirt path ahead and the blue sky above. 30 minutes, she mumbled to herself. "I can handle 30 minutes. The first few turns were easy enough. Carolina kept track of her path, making mental notes at each junction. Left, right, right again. The distant sounds of the fair, cheerful. Music, children laughing, announcements over the loudspeaker, helped her keep her bearings, but as she ventured deeper into the maze, the sounds began to fade. The walls of corn seemed to close in around her, and the paths started to look eerily similar. After 20 minutes of walking, Carolina realized she had no idea where she was. "This is ridiculous," she said out loud, pulling out her phone. "No, signal." "Of course." She tried retracing her steps, but each turn led to another identical path. The afternoon wore on, and the shadows grew longer. The cheerful sounds of the fair had disappeared completely, replaced by the rustling of cornstalks in the breeze. After an hour of wandering, Carolina's annoyance turned to worry. Her phone battery died. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky with streaks of orange and pink. The temperature dropped, and she hugged her light jacket tighter around herself. "Hello?" she called out, her voice sounding small in the vast maze. "Is anyone there? I'm lost." Only the whisper of the wind answered her. For the first time, Carolina felt a flicker of real fear. What if nobody found her? What if she had to spend the night out here? As the last rays of sunlight disappeared, leaving her in the growing darkness, Carolina sat down on the ground, fighting back tears of frustration. This whole trip had been a mistake, just like her relationship with Richard, just like trusting her boss when he said she was valuable to the company. Then she heard it. Footsteps on the dirt path. Carolina jumped to her feet. "Hello? Is someone there?" A warm light appeared around the corner, and then a man stepped into view. He carried an old-fashioned lantern that cast a golden glow on his face. He was tall, with broad shoulders and work-worn hands. His face was tanned from the sun, with the beginnings of smile lines around his eyes, though he wasn't smiling now. He looked surprised to see her. "Didn't think anyone would still be in here this late," he said, his voice deep and calm. Carolina felt relief wash over her. "I got lost," she admitted, embarrassed. My phone died and I couldn't find my way out. The man nodded, studying her. You're not from around here. It wasn't a question, but Carolina answered anyway. No. My friends brought me from the city for the fair. She brushed dirt from her jeans. I think I took a wrong turn somewhere. The corner of his mouth lifted slightly. Sometimes the wrong turn leads you right where you were meant to be. Something about the way he said it made Carolina's heart skip a beat. She'd never been one for country charm, but there was something different about this man. He wasn't trying to impress her. He was just authentic. I'm Davi, he said. Davi, Moreira, this is my family's farm. Carolina Brandon, she replied. And I'm really glad to see you, Davi Moreira. He lifted the lantern higher. Come on, I'll get you out of here. As they walked, Carolina found herself stealing glances at Davi. He moved with quiet confidence, never hesitating at the many junctions in the maze. His profile in the lantern light was striking, a strong jaw, straight nose, and eyes that seemed to take in everything. Do you rescue lost city folks often? She asked, trying to break the silence. Not as often as you might think, he replied. Most people finish the maze before sunset. My sister designed it, but I know every inch of this land. Your sister designed this whole maze? Davi nodded. Luisa is the creative one. She changes the pattern every year to keep the town spirit alive. There was a touch of pride in his voice. I mostly stay on the edges, fixing fences, managing the crops. It's a beautiful farm, Carolina said, surprised to find she meant it. In the fading light, with the stars beginning to appear overhead, there was something magical about this place. It's been in our family for 3 generations, Davi said. My grandfather started with just 20 acres. Now we have over 200. They walked in comfortable silence for a while. Carolina noticed how Davi seemed to belong here, among the corn and the earth and the open sky. It was so different from the men she knew in the city, always checking their phones, always rushing somewhere. So what brought you to our fair, Davi? Asked finally. Besides getting lost in our maze, Carolina laughed softly. My friends thought I needed a break. I've had a rough couple of months. Work trouble? Work trouble, relationship trouble, you name it, she admitted. I lost my job and my boyfriend in the same week. Davi glanced at her. His loss, he said simply. The unexpected compliment warmed Carolina's cheeks. Before she could respond, they rounded a corner and suddenly the exit was before them. Beyond the archway, the lights of the fair twinkled like earthbound stars. We made it, Carolina said, surprised at the twinge of disappointment she felt. Here. We are, Davi agreed, extinguishing his lantern. In the glow from the fairgrounds, Carolina could see his face more clearly now. He was handsome in a rugged, unpolished way, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and eyes the color of rich soil. Thank you for rescuing me, she said. I might still be wandering around in there if you hadn't come along. Just doing my job, Davi replied, but there was warmth in his voice. Checking the maze is part of my nightly routine during the festival. Carolina spotted her friends near the cotton candy stand, waving frantically when they saw her. Those are my friends, she explained. They're probably wondering what happened to me. Davy nodded. You should go to them, they look worried. Carolina hesitated, suddenly reluctant to leave. Will you be around tomorrow? I mean, we're staying for the weekend and I'd like to see more of the farm, if that's okay. Something flickered in Davy's eyes. Surprise, maybe, or interest. I'll be here, he said. I'm usually by the apple cider stand in the mornings helping my father. Then maybe I'll see you tomorrow, Carolina said, a genuine smile spreading across her face, the first real smile in weeks. Maybe you will, Davy replied, and this time he smiled too. As Carolina walked toward her friends, she felt something she hadn't expected, a flutter of excitement, a sense of possibility. Maybe getting lost wasn't such a bad thing after all. Have you been? Marta exclaimed, grabbing Carolina's arm. We were about to call security. You've been in there for hours. I got lost, Carolina explained. My phone died, and I couldn't find my way out until Davy found me. Davy? Eleanor's eyebrows shot up. Who's Davy? He works here. Well, actually, his family owns the farm, Carolina said, trying to sound casual. He was really nice. He helped me find my way out. Marta and Eleanor exchanged knowing looks. What? Carolina demanded. "Why are you looking at each other like that?" "Because," Marta said with a grin, "you haven't looked this interested in anything or anyone since before Richard broke up with you." Carolina felt her cheeks grow warm. "Don't be ridiculous. He was just being helpful." "Uh-huh," Elena teased, "and that's why you can't stop smiling." Carolina hadn't even realized she was smiling. She touched her lips, surprised. "It's not like that. I don't know. There's something about him." "Well, we're here all weekend," Marta reminded her. "Plenty of time to find out what that something is." As they walked through the fair, Carolina found herself looking around, half hoping to catch another glimpse of Davy. The fair was winding down for the night, with vendors closing their stalls and families heading to the parking lot. The three women decided to get dinner at a small restaurant in town before returning to their rented cabin. Over plates of home-cooked food, Carolina's friends tried to get more details about her maze rescuer, but she kept her answers vague. She wasn't sure why, but she wanted to keep Davy to herself for a little while. There was something special about their meeting that she wasn't ready to share. That night, in the quiet of the rustic cabin, Carolina lay awake long after her friends had fallen asleep. She thought about Davy's words. "Sometimes the wrong turn leads you right where you were meant to be." Was this weekend trip a wrong turn that would lead her somewhere unexpected? For the first time in months, Carolina felt a spark of hope. Maybe, just maybe, getting lost was exactly what she needed. The next morning, Carolina woke up early. She dressed with more care than usual, choosing a simple blue sundress that brought out the color of her eyes. She told herself it was because the weather forecast predicted a warm day, but the flutter in her stomach when she thought about seeing Davy again told a different story. "You're up early," Elena noted, watching Carolina apply a touch of mascara. "And you're wearing a dress. Interesting. It's supposed to be hot today," Carolina said defensively. "Uh-huh," Elena replied with a knowing smile. "And it has nothing to do with a certain farmer named Davy." Carolina ignored her friend's teasing. "I'm going to head down to the fair. I want to try that apple cider everyone was talking about." "I bet you do," Marta chimed in from her bed. "We'll meet you there in an hour or so." The morning air was crisp and clean as Carolina walked the short distance from the cabin to the fairgrounds. The fair was just opening, with vendors setting up their booths and the smell of fresh pastries filling the air. Carolina made her way to the apple cider stand, her heart beating a little faster with each step. And there he was. Davy stood behind the wooden counter, talking with an older man who shared his strong features. His father, Carolina guessed. Davy wore a simple flannel shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing tanned forearms. When he spotted Carolina approaching, his serious expression softened into a smile that made her breath catch. "You came back," he said, sounding pleased. Carolina nodded. "I thought I'd try the famous apple cider I've been hearing about." Davy's father looked between them with interest. "Who's your friend, son?" "This is Carolina," Davy explained. "She got lost in the maze last night. Carolina, this is my father, Miguel Moreira." Miguel's face crinkled into a warm smile. "Any friend of Davy's is welcome here. First cider of the day is on the house." As Miguel poured her a cup of amber liquid, Carolina caught Davy watching her. Their eyes met, and something passed between them, a spark of connection that made Carolina's cheeks warm. She took a sip of the cider and couldn't hold back a smile. "This is delicious. Family recipe," Miguel said proudly. "Been making it the same way for 50 years. A customer approached the stand and Miguel turned to help them. Davy leaned across the counter toward Carolina. "I get a break in about an hour," he said, his voice low. "If you'd like, I could show you around the farm. The real farm, not just the festival parts." Carolina nodded, perhaps too quickly. "I'd like that." Davy's smile widened. "Meet me by the Red Barn at 10. As Carolina walked away, cider in hand, she couldn't help but feel that something important was beginning, something she never could have expected when her friends dragged her to this country fair. Sometimes the wrong turn really does lead you right where you're meant to be. At exactly 10 o'clock, Carolina stood by the Red Barn, nervously smoothing her sundress. The fairgrounds were now bustling with visitors, but the noise seemed distant as she watched for Davy. She spotted him walking toward her, and her heart did that strange little skip again. In the morning light, she could see him more clearly. His dark hair had a slight wave to it, and his face was tanned from working outdoors. He'd changed into a fresh blue shirt that brought out the warmth in his eyes. "You came?" he said, sounding pleased. "I said I would," Carolina replied with a smile. Davy gestured toward a dirt path that led away from the fairgrounds. "I thought we could start with the orchards, if that sounds good to you." They walked side by side down the path, their shoulders occasionally brushing. Carolina noticed how Davy seemed to relax the further they got from the crowds, his stride becoming more natural, his shoulders less tense. "So," Davy said, breaking the comfortable silence between them, "what do you do in the city?" "When you're not visiting country fairs, I mean." Carolina sighed. "Until recently, I was a marketing executive for a tech company. I worked 60-hour weeks helping other people sell their dreams." "And now?" "Now I'm between jobs," she admitted. "The company was restructuring, which is corporate speak for we're letting you go even though you've given us everything for the past 5 years. Davy frowned. "That sounds rough." "It was." "Is," Carolina corrected herself. "The same week, my boyfriend of 3 years broke up with me by text message. Said he'd found someone who had more time for him." She winced at how bitter she sounded. "Sorry, I don't usually dump my problems on strangers." "We're not exactly strangers anymore," Davy pointed out. "Not after I rescued you from the maze of doom." That made Carolina laugh, the sound surprising her. When was the last time she'd really laughed? They crested a small hill, and Carolina gasped. Before them stretched neat rows of apple trees, their branches heavy with fruit. Beyond the orchard, fields of golden wheat swayed in the gentle breeze, and in the distance mountains rose blue against the horizon. "This is beautiful," she said softly. "This is home," Davy replied, a note of pride in his voice. "Those apple trees were planted by my grandfather. The wheat fields beyond them are new, my addition to the farm." He led her into the orchard, where the sweet scent of apples filled the air. They walked between the rows of trees, Davy occasionally reaching up to check a fruit or straighten a branch. "You really love this place, don't you?" Carolina observed. "It's in my blood," Davy said simply. "I've never wanted to be anywhere else." He glanced at her. "That probably sounds boring to someone from the city." Carolina shook her head. "Not boring, just different. In the city, everyone's always chasing the next thing, the next job, the next promotion, the next relationship. No one ever seems satisfied with what they have." "And what about you?" Davy asked. "Were you satisfied?" The question caught Carolina off guard. "I thought I was," she said slowly. "I had the job, the apartment, the boyfriend. I was checking all the boxes I thought I needed to check." She plucked a leaf from a low-hanging branch. "But when it all fell apart, I realized maybe I wasn't as happy as I thought." Davy nodded, his eyes understanding. "Sometimes we get so caught up in where we think we should be that we forget to ask if it's where we want to be." They continued through the orchard, Davy pointing out different varieties of apples and explaining how they were grown. Carolina found herself fascinated, not just by the information, but by the way Davy talked about farming, with knowledge, respect, and genuine passion. "Want to try one?" Davy asked, reaching up to pluck a large red apple from a branch. "Is that allowed?" Carolina teased. "Won't the apple police come after us?" Davy laughed, a rich, warm sound that made Carolina smile. "I think I can pull some strings with the management." He polished the apple on his shirt and handed it to her. "This variety is called Honey Crisp. It's sweet with just the right amount of tartness." Carolina took a bite, and the flavor burst in her mouth, juicy, crisp, and perfect. "Oh my God," she mumbled around the mouthful. "This is amazing." Davy watched her with amusement. "Better than store-bought, right?" "So much better," she agreed, taking another bite. "I don't think I can ever go back to supermarket apples now." They continued their tour, moving from the orchard to the wheat fields. Davy explained the challenges of farming, from unpredictable weather to market fluctuations. Carolina was surprised by how much went into producing the food people took for granted. "It sounds hard," she said. "It is," Davy agreed, "but worth it. There's something about working with your hands." watching things grow, being part of the cycle of seasons. He ran his fingers through the wheat stalks. It grounds you. Carolina thought about her old job, sitting in an office all day, staring at spreadsheets and making phone calls. When was the last time she'd felt grounded? As they walked back toward the farmhouse, Davy pointed to a small cottage on the edge of the property. That's where I live. My parents have the main house, and my sister Louisa lives in town with her husband. It's cute, Carolina said, admiring the stone cottage with its bright blue door. It's small, Davy replied with a shrug, but it's enough for me. They reached a garden behind the main farmhouse where an older woman was picking tomatoes. She straightened when she saw them approaching, pushing a strand of silver-streaked dark hair behind her ear. "Mai," Davy called, "I want you to meet someone." The woman smiled warmly as they approached. She had Davy's eyes and his easy smile. "This is Carolina Brando," Davy introduced. "She's visiting from the city. Carolina, this is my mother, Elena." "Moreira. It's nice to meet you, Mrs. Moreira," Carolina said, suddenly feeling shy. "Please call me Elena," Davy's mother insisted, removing her gardening gloves to shake Carolina's hand. "Any friend of Davy's is welcome here." She gave her son a questioning look that Carolina couldn't quite interpret. "Carolina got lost in Louisa's maze last night," Davy explained. "I was just showing her around the farm." "Well, you must stay for lunch," Elena insisted. "I'm making fresh tomato soup and bread from our wheat." Before Carolina could politely decline, Davy said, "That would be great, Mai, thank you." Elena nodded, pleased. "It will be ready in an hour. Davy, why don't you show Carolina the lake while I finish up here?" As they walked away, Carolina whispered, "Your mother seems nice." "She is," Davy agreed. "Though I should warn you, she's probably already planning our wedding." Carolina laughed, but felt her cheeks grow warm. "Does she do that with every girl you bring home?" Davy glanced at her, his expression suddenly serious. "I don't bring girls home, Carolina." The weight of his words hung between them as they walked toward a small lake that glittered in the sunlight. Carolina felt a flutter of something in her chest, surprise, pleasure, and a hint of nervousness. The lake was surrounded by willow trees, their branches dipping toward the water. A small wooden dock extended into the clear blue water. "It's like something from a postcard," Carolina murmured. "My sister and I learned to swim here," Davy said, leading her onto the dock. "We spent every summer day in this lake when we were kids." They sat at the edge of the dock, their feet dangling above the water. Dragonflies skimmed the surface, and somewhere in the distance, a bird called. "It's so peaceful," Carolina said softly. "That's what I love about it," Davy replied. "When things get hectic or I need to think, I come here." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the sun warm on their faces. Carolina couldn't remember the last time she'd felt this relaxed, this present in a moment. "Can I ask you something?" Davy said finally. "Sure. What will you do when you go back to the city?" Carolina sighed. The question had been hovering at the back of her mind since she'd lost her job. "I don't know," she admitted. "Look for another job, I guess. Start over." "Is that what you want? Another job like the one you had?" Carolina stared out at the lake. "I don't know what I want anymore," she said honestly. "I thought I had it all figured out, but now," she shrugged. "Now I'm not so sure." Davy nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Sometimes life has a way of shaking things up when we need it most. Like getting lost in a cornfield maze," Carolina suggested with a smile. "Exactly like that," Davy agreed, his eyes crinkling at the corners. The sound of a bell ringing in the distance caught their attention. "That's lunch," Davy explained, standing and offering Carolina his hand. She took it, surprised by the warmth and strength of his grasp. He helped her to her feet, and for a moment they stood close enough that Carolina could smell the clean scent of his soap mixed with the earthy smell of the farm. Something passed between them, a current of awareness that made her breath catch. Davy cleared his throat and stepped back, still holding her hand. "We should get back," he said, his voice slightly rougher than before. Lunch was served at a large, wooden table on the farmhouse porch. Miguel and Elena welcomed Carolina warmly, asking about her life in the city and her visit to Vale Sereno. Carolina found herself relaxing in their company, charmed by their genuine interest and easy conversation. The food was simple but delicious: fresh tomato soup made from garden vegetables, crusty homemade bread, and apple cider that tasted even better than what she'd had at the fair. "So, Carolina," Miguel said as they finished eating, "what do you think of our little farm?" "It's beautiful," she replied honestly. "I've never seen anything like it. Davy has worked hard to keep it that way," Elena said proudly. "He's taken what his grandfather started and made it even better." Davy looked embarrassed by the praise. "I've just tried to be a good steward of the land." "Don't let him fool you," Miguel told Carolina. "My son has turned this farm into one of the most successful in the region. His organic methods have doubled our yield, and he's the one who started selling directly to restaurants in the city." Carolina looked at Davy with new respect. "You never mentioned that." He shrugged, clearly uncomfortable being the center of attention. "It's just business." After lunch, Carolina reluctantly mentioned that she should get back to her friends, who were probably wondering where she was. "Of course," Eleanor said, standing to clear the dishes. "But you must come back before you leave Vale Sereno. Perhaps for dinner tomorrow night." Davy protested softly. "What?" Elena asked innocently. "I'm just being hospitable to our guest." Carolina smiled. "I'd love to come for dinner, if it's not too much trouble." "No trouble at all," Elena assured her. "Davy will pick you up." "Where are you staying?" "At the Pine Cabin Rentals just outside of town." "Perfect," Elena said before Davy could respond. "He'll pick you up at 6. As Davy walked Carolina back toward the fairgrounds, she could tell he was embarrassed by his mother's forwardness. "I'm sorry about that," he said. "My mother can be enthusiastic." Carolina laughed. "It's sweet. She obviously cares about you." "Too much sometimes," Davy muttered, but there was affection in his voice. When they reached the edge of the fair, Carolina spotted her friends by the craft booths. They saw her, too, their eyebrows raising in unison when they noticed Davy. "Those are my friends," Carolina explained. "I should probably go explain where I've been for the past few hours." Davy nodded. "Of course, so tomorrow at 6. "Tomorrow at 6, Carolina confirmed, surprised by how much she was looking forward to it. For a moment they stood awkwardly, neither sure how to say goodbye. Then Davy leaned in and kissed her cheek, his lips warm against her skin. "See you tomorrow, Carolina," he said softly, before turning to walk back toward the farm. Carolina touched her cheek, a smile spreading across her face as she watched him go. When she finally turned toward her friends, they were both staring at her with identical expressions of delighted curiosity. "Well, well, well," Marta said as Carolina approached. "Look who's been gone all morning with a handsome farmer." "It wasn't like that," Carolina protested weakly. "He was just showing me around the farm." "Uh-huh," Elena teased. "And that kiss we just saw?" Carolina felt her cheeks grow warm. "It was just on the cheek." "Still a kiss," Marta pointed out. "And from the look on your face, you didn't mind one bit." Carolina couldn't deny it. "He's different," she admitted. "Not like the guys in the city. He's real, you know, genuine." Her friends exchanged knowing looks. "What?" Carolina demanded. "Nothing," Elena said innocently. "It's just nice to see you smiling again." Carolina realized she was smiling, had been smiling all day, in fact. Something about being with Davy made her feel lighter, more herself than she had in years. "His parents invited me to dinner tomorrow night," she told her friends. "Davy's picking me up at 6. Marta's eyebrows shot up. "Meeting the parents already? This is getting serious." "It's just dinner," Carolina insisted, but even as she said it, she knew it was more than that. There was something happening between her and Davy, something unexpected and exciting. "What about going back to the city? On Sunday?" Elena asked. "We're supposed to head back in the morning." Carolina hadn't thought about that. The idea of leaving Vale Sereno, of leaving Davy, suddenly made her chest tighten. "I don't know," she said slowly. "Maybe I could stay. An extra day or two? The cabin rental is paid through Monday, right?" Marta and Elena exchanged another look. "What if we went back as planned?" Marta suggested. "And you stayed. We could take the bus, and you could keep the rental car. Would you mind?" Carolina asked. surprised by her friend's understanding. "Of course not," Elena assured her. "We dragged you here to help you feel better, and it looks like it's working better than we expected." Carolina hugged her friends, grateful for their support. "You guys are the best." As they explored the fair together, Carolina found herself looking forward to the next day, to seeing Davy again, to spending more time in this place that already felt more like home than her apartment in the city ever had. That night, as she lay in bed listening to her friend's soft breathing, Carolina thought about how quickly her life was changing. Just 2 days ago, she'd been miserable, still nursing the wounds of her breakup and job loss. Now she was excited about the future for the first time in months, all because she got lost in a cornfield maze and found something, someone, she hadn't even known she was looking for. The next day passed in a blur of activity. Carolina and her friends spent the morning at the fair, trying local foods and watching the craft demonstrations. In the afternoon, they helped her friends pack for their return journey. "Are you sure you'll be okay here alone?" Marta asked as she zipped her suitcase. "I'll be fine," Carolina assured her. "It's only for a couple of days." "And then what?" Elena asked gently. "Back to the city? Back to looking for another corporate job?" Carolina sighed. "I don't know. I haven't thought that far ahead." But that wasn't entirely true. She had been thinking about it, about what waited for her in the city and what might be possible here in Vale Sereno. It was crazy, of course. She barely knew Davy, barely knew this place, and yet she felt more at home here than she had anywhere in years. At 5:30, Carolina started getting ready for dinner. She chose a simple dress in soft green, applied light makeup, and let her hair fall in natural waves around her shoulders. Her hands trembled slightly as she put on a pair of small gold earrings, a sign of nerves she couldn't ignore. "You look beautiful," Marta said from the doorway of the bathroom. "Thanks," Carolina replied, meeting her friend's eyes in the mirror. "Is this crazy? Getting all dressed up for a man I just met?" Marta shook her head. "Not crazy. Brave. You're letting yourself feel something again, after Richard hurt you so badly. That takes courage." Carolina turned to hug her friend. "When did you get so wise?" "I've always been wise," Marta joked. "You were just too busy working to notice." At exactly 6 o'clock, there was a knock at the cabin door. Carolina's heart raced. As Elena went to answer it, Davy stood on the porch, looking handsome in dark jeans and a crisp white shirt. He'd clearly made an effort, and the thought made Carolina smile. "Right on time," Elena said, ushering him in. "Carolina will be ready in a minute." Davy nodded politely to both women. "It's nice to meet you both. Carolina's told me about you." "All good things, I hope," Marta said with a grin. "Of course," Davy replied. "She says you're the ones who convinced her to come to Vale Sereno." "Best idea we ever had, apparently," Elena teased. Carolina emerged from the bedroom, feeling suddenly shy. Davy's eyes widened slightly when he saw her, and the appreciation in his gaze made her cheeks warm. "You look beautiful," he said simply. "Thank you," Carolina replied. "You clean up pretty well yourself," Marta cleared her throat. "Well, you two should get going. Don't want to keep your parents waiting, Davy." As they walked to Davy's truck, Carolina felt a flutter of nervous excitement in her stomach. Tonight felt important somehow, like a turning point. Davy opened the passenger door for her, a gesture that reminded Carolina how different he was from the men she dated in the city. As he drove the short distance to the farm, they fell into easy conversation about their days. "My friends are heading back to the city tomorrow," Carolina told him. Davy glanced at her. "And you? When are you leaving?" There was a note in his voice that made Carolina's heart beat faster. "I'm staying a few extra days," she said. "Until Monday, at least." The smile that spread across Davy's face told her everything she needed to know about how he felt about that news. As they pulled up to the farmhouse, Carolina saw that the porch was decorated with string lights, casting a warm glow in the early evening. Music drifted from an open window, and the smell of something delicious filled the air. "Your mother went all out," Carolina observed. Davy looked embarrassed. "I told her to keep it simple." "It's sweet," Carolina assured him, touching his arm lightly. "It's nice that she cares so much." As they walked toward the house, Davy took her hand. His palm was warm against hers, his fingers intertwining with her own, in a way that felt both new and somehow familiar. Carolina knew that tonight would change everything. She was standing at a crossroads, and the path ahead was both terrifying and thrilling. But as Davy squeezed her hand gently, she realized she wasn't afraid anymore. For the first time in a long time, she was exactly where she wanted to be. The Moreira farmhouse was warm and inviting, filled with delicious smells and the sound of laughter. As Davy led Carolina inside, she was surprised to see that there were more people than just his parents. "You didn't tell me this was going to be a family dinner," she whispered to Davy. "I didn't know," he replied, looking equally surprised. "My mother may have invited a few extra people." A young woman with Davy's dark eyes and warm smile approached them. "So this is the city girl who got lost in my maze," she said, extending her hand to Carolina. "I'm Louisa, Davy's sister and maze architect." "Nice to meet you," Carolina replied, shaking her hand. "Your maze is very effective." Louisa laughed. "That's a polite way of saying it's impossible to solve. But if you hadn't gotten lost, you might not have met my brother. So I think it worked out perfectly." A tall man with glasses appeared at Louisa's side, slipping an arm around her waist. "I'm Paolo, Louisa's husband," he introduced himself. "Don't mind her. She takes an almost evil pleasure in confusing people with her mazes." "It's not evil," Louisa protested. "It's artistic." Carolina found herself laughing, immediately at ease with Davy's sister and brother-in-law. They reminded her of her own friends, warm, funny, and just a little bit mischievous. Elena appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on an apron. "Ah, you're here. Perfect timing. Dinner is almost ready." She ushered everyone toward the large dining table in the corner of the room. "Davy, show Carolina where to sit." The table was beautifully set with a checkered cloth, candles, and fresh flowers from the garden. Carolina noticed that Eleanor had placed her next to Davy at one end of the table. "This is lovely," Carolina said as Davy pulled out her chair. "My mother doesn't do anything halfway," he replied with a mix of embarrassment and pride. As everyone settled around the table, Carolina was introduced to two more guests, Tio Juan, Davy's uncle, and his wife, Tia Beatriz. They were older versions of Miguel and Elena, with the same warm smiles and easy manner. "So, Carolina," Tio Juan said as Elena began serving a steaming pot of what looked like beef stew. "Davy tells us you work in the city. What do you do there?" Carolina hesitated, still uncomfortable with her employment status. "I was in marketing for a tech company, but I'm between jobs at the moment." "Ah, new opportunities," Tia Beatriz said kindly. "Sometimes a change is exactly what we need." "That's what I'm hoping," Carolina replied with a small smile. The conversation flowed easily as they ate. The food was delicious, a rich stew made with beef from a neighboring farm, fresh vegetables from Elena's garden, and bread baked that morning. Carolina couldn't remember the last time she'd had a home-cooked meal this good. "This is amazing," she told Elena after her first bite. "I haven't had food like this since my grandmother was alive." "Was your grandmother a good cook?" Elena asked. Carolina nodded, feeling a pang of nostalgia. "The best. She lived in a small town outside of São Paulo. I used to spend summers with her when I was a child." "And what about your parents?" Miguel asked. "Are they still in the city?" "Father passed away when I was in college," Carolina said. "My mother remarried and moved to Canada with her new husband. We talk on the phone, but I don't see her very often." "I'm sorry about your father," Davy said softly, his hand finding hers under the table. Carolina squeezed his fingers gratefully. "Thank you. It was a long time ago." "So you're on your own?" "In the city?" Elena asked, a hint of motherly concern in her voice. "I have good friends," Carolina assured her, thinking of Marta and Elena. "And my job kept me busy. At least it did until recently." "What happened with your job?" Louisa asked, passing the bread basket. Carolina sighed. "The company was cutting costs. I was one of the unnecessary expenses." She tried to keep the bitterness out of her voice. 5 years of 60-hour weeks, and in the end it didn't matter. Davy's hand tightened around hers. "Their loss," he said simply. There was something in his voice, a certainty, a steadiness, that made Carolina believe him. Maybe it wasn't her fault. Maybe it was just business, as her former boss had claimed. "What will you do now?" Paolo asked. It was the question everyone had been asking her, the one she still didn't have an answer to. "I don't know," she admitted. "Look for another job, I guess. Or maybe try something completely different," Luisa suggested. "If you could do anything, what would it be?" Carolina hadn't thought about it that way. What would she do if she could start over, choose any path? "I'm not sure," she said slowly. "I always wanted to write. In college, I studied journalism before switching to marketing." "Why did you switch?" Davy asked, genuinely curious. "Money," Carolina said with a small laugh. "Marketing paid better, and I had student loans to think about." "But you enjoyed writing?" Miguel asked. Carolina nodded. "I loved it. I had an internship at a small newspaper one summer. I wrote human interest stories, profiles of local businesses, that sort of thing." She smiled at the memory. "It wasn't glamorous, but I felt like I was doing something meaningful." "Vale Sereno has a local paper," Tio Juan mentioned casually. "The editor is always looking for contributors." Carolina blinked in surprise. "Really?" "It's small," Tio Juan continued, "but well respected in the region. I know Carlos, the editor, quite well. I could introduce you if you're interested." "That's very kind of you," Carolina said, "but I'm only here for a few more days." A silence fell over the table. Carolina felt Davi stiffen beside her, though his face remained carefully neutral. "Well, the offer stands," Tio Juan said easily. "Sometimes a few days is all it takes to make a connection." The conversation moved on to other topics. The success of the Harvest Festival, Luisa's plans for next year's maize, Paolo's work as a veterinarian in town. Throughout dinner, Carolina was struck by how seamlessly the family included her, as if she'd always been a part of their gatherings. After the meal, as Eleanor served coffee and a homemade apple cake, Luisa leaned across the table toward Carolina. "So, have you seen the stars from Vale Sereno yet?" Carolina shook her head. "Not really. The lights from the fair make it hard to see them clearly." "Then you haven't seen stars at all?" Luisa declared. "Davi, you should take Carolina up to the hill after dinner. The view is incredible." Davi gave his sister a look that Carolina couldn't quite interpret. "I'm sure Carolina is tired after a long day." "Actually, I'd love to see the stars," Carolina said, "if you don't mind showing me." Something flickered in Davi's eyes, hesitation but also pleasure. "Of course," he said softly. "I'd like that." After helping clear the table despite Elena's protests, Carolina found herself standing on the porch with Davi. The night was cool, and he draped a light jacket over her shoulders. "My father's," he explained. "It might be a bit big, but it'll keep you warm." The jacket smelled of earth and pine and something uniquely masculine that Carolina found comforting. She pulled it closer around her as they walked away from the house, following a narrow path that led up a gentle slope. "Your family is wonderful," she said as they walked. "They can be a bit much," Davy replied, but there was affection in his voice. "No, they're perfect," Carolina insisted. "The way they talk to each other, the way they included me." "It's nice." Davy glanced at her. "Don't you have family dinners in the city?" Carolina shook her head. "Not like that. I usually eat at my desk or grab takeout on the way home." She thought about the countless meals she'd eaten alone in her apartment. Too tired to cook, too busy to notice she was lonely. "I can't remember the last time I sat down for a meal like that." "That's sad," Davi said simply. "I never thought about it before," Carolina admitted. "But yes, I guess it is." They reached the top of the hill, and Carolina gasped. The view was spectacular. The valley stretched out below them, the lights of the fair twinkling in the distance. But it was the sky that took her breath away, a vast canopy of stars, more than she'd ever seen in her life. "Oh my God," she whispered, tilting her head back. To take it all in, Davy smiled at her reaction. "City girl never seen stars before?" "Not like this," Carolina said, still staring upward. "In the city, you can see a few stars on a clear night, but nothing like this." Davy spread out a blanket he'd been carrying and gestured for her to sit. They settled side by side, both looking up at the night sky. "That's the Big Dipper," Davy said, pointing. "And over there, see those 3 stars in a line? That's Orion's belt." Carolina leaned closer to follow his pointing finger, their shoulders touching. "Show me more," she said. For the next half hour, Davy named constellations and told her the stories behind them. Carolina listened, enchanted not just by the stars but by the man beside her. His knowledge, his quiet passion, the way his voice deepened when he spoke about things he loved. "How do you know so much about stars?" she asked. "My grandfather," Davy replied. "He used to bring me up here when I was a boy. He said a farmer needs to know the stars because they tell us when to plant, when to harvest." "Do they really?" Davy nodded. "For thousands of years, farmers have used the stars as a calendar. Before smartphones and weather apps, this was how we knew the seasons were changing." Carolina thought about her own relationship with nature, practically non-existent in the concrete landscape of the city. "That's beautiful," she said softly, "being so connected to the earth and the sky." They fell silent, each lost in thought. The night was quiet except for the distant sounds of the fair and the chirping of crickets. Carolina felt a sense of peace she hadn't experienced in years. "Can I ask you something?" Davy said finally. "Of course. Why did you stay? Your friends are leaving tomorrow, but you decided to stay longer. Why?" Carolina turned to look at him. In the starlight, his face was half in shadow, but his eyes were intent on hers. "I think you know why," she said softly. Davy held her gaze. "I'd like to hear you say it." Carolina's heart raced. "I stayed because of you," she admitted. "Because in the short time I've known you, I've felt more alive than I have in years. Because when I'm with you, I feel like myself again." Davy reached out, gently tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "I've never met anyone like you, Carolina," he said, his voice low. "When I found you in that maze, something changed for me. I can't explain it, but I felt like I was supposed to find you. Sometimes the wrong turn leads you right where you're meant to be." Carolina quoted his words from their first meeting. "Exactly," Davy whispered, slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted to. He leaned forward. Carolina met him halfway, her eyes closing as their lips touched in a gentle kiss. His hand came up to cradle her face, and she leaned into his touch, feeling a warmth spread through her entire body. When they finally pulled apart, Carolina kept her eyes closed for a moment, savoring the feeling. When she opened them, Davy was watching her with an expression that made her breath catch, tender, wondering, as if he couldn't quite believe she was real. "I've wanted to do that since I first saw you," he admitted, "even when I was lost and annoyed in your cornfield." Carolina teased. "Especially then," Davy replied with a smile. "You looked so beautiful standing there with your city shoes all muddy, trying to pretend you weren't scared." Carolina laughed. "I was terrified, and trying very hard not to show it." "Tonight," Davy said, his smile widening. "It was adorable." He leaned in to kiss her again, and this time there was more urgency in his touch. Carolina wound her arms around his neck, losing herself in the feeling of his lips on hers, his hands in her hair. When they finally broke apart, both slightly breathless, Carolina rested her forehead against his. "This is crazy," she whispered. "We barely know each other." "Does it feel crazy?" Davy asked, his hand warm against the small of her back. Carolina considered the question. Despite the whirlwind nature of their meeting, despite the short time they'd known each other, being with Davy felt like the most natural thing in the world. "No," she admitted. "It feels right." They stayed on the hilltop for hours, talking, kissing and stargazing. Carolina told Davy about her life in the city, her small but expensive apartment, her friends, her dreams of writing that she'd set aside for her career. Davy told her about growing up on the farm, about taking over from his father, about his plans to expand the organic section of their operation. "I want to start a community-supported agriculture program," he explained, "where families from town and even the city can buy shares of our harvest." "That sounds amazing," Carolina said. "Have you looked into marketing it?" Davy laughed. "Not really. Marketing isn't exactly my strong suit." "Well, that happens to be mine," Carolina pointed out. "I could help you set something up before I leave." A shadow crossed Davy's face at the mention of her departure. "When do you have to go back?" he asked, his voice carefully neutral. "My cabin rental is paid through Monday," Carolina said. "So, I was planning to leave then." Davy nodded, his eyes on the horizon. "And then back to the city, back to looking for a new job." That was the plan, Carolina said slowly. But plans can change. Davy looked at her sharply. What do you mean? Carolina took a deep breath. I don't know exactly, but being here with you, with your family, it's made me realize that maybe the life I was living in the city wasn't making me happy. She reached for his hand. I'm not saying I'm ready to give it all up and move to the countryside, but I'm not in a rush to get back either. Hope flickered in Davy's eyes. So you'd consider staying longer? I'd consider it, Carolina agreed. Maybe I could extend my cabin rental for a week or two, see where things go. Davy's smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. I'd like that, he said, squeezing her hand. A lot. By the time they walked back down the hill to the farmhouse, it was past midnight. The house was quiet, the family having gone to bed. Davy's truck was parked in the driveway. I should get you back to your cabin, he said reluctantly. Carolina nodded, though she wasn't ready for the night to end. Thank you for dinner, and the stars, and... She blushed slightly. Everything else. Davy smiled, pulling her close for one more kiss. It was my pleasure, he murmured against her lips. The drive back to the cabin was quiet, both of them lost in thought. When Davy pulled up in front of the small wooden building, he turned off the engine and turned to face her. Can I see you tomorrow? He asked. Your friends will be gone, and I thought maybe you'd like some company. I'd love that, Carolina replied. What did you have in mind? I was thinking I could show you more of Vale Sereno, Davy suggested. There's a waterfall about an hour's hike from here that's beautiful this time of year. That sounds perfect, Carolina said. What time? I'll pick you up at 9. We can make a day of it, pack a picnic lunch. 9 it is, Carolina agreed. Davy walked her to the cabin door, his hand warm in hers. At the threshold, he kissed her. Once more a gentle good night that left her wanting more. Sleep well, city girl, he teased softly. You too, farmer, Carolina replied with a smile. Inside the cabin, Carolina found her friends still awake, sitting at the small kitchen table with cups of tea. Well, 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 Marta said with a grin. Look who's finally home. How was dinner? With the Moreiras? It was wonderful, Carolina said, unable to keep the smile off her face. They're the nicest family. And what about the son? Elena asked, wiggling her eyebrows. Anything happened there? Carolina blushed, which was answer. Enough. I knew it, Marta exclaimed. Tell us everything and don't leave out any details. Carolina sat down at the table, accepting the cup of tea Elena poured for her. His family is amazing, she began. They made me feel so welcome, like I belonged. There. And Davy? Elena prompted. Carolina's smile softened. He showed me the stars from a hill on their property. We talked for hours, and yes, he kissed me. How was it? Marta asked eagerly. Perfect, Carolina admitted. Everything about him is just perfect. Her friends exchanged knowing looks. What? Carolina demanded. You're falling for him, Elena said simply. Hard and fast, Carolina couldn't deny it. Is that crazy? We just met. Sometimes when it's right, you just know, Marta said with a shrug. My parents got engaged after knowing each other for 2 weeks, and they've been married for 30 years. I'm not thinking about marriage, Carolina protested, but I am thinking about staying longer than Monday. Her friends didn't look surprised. How much longer? Elena asked. I don't know, Carolina admitted. A week, maybe 2. I want to see where this goes. What about your job search? Marta asked. The interviews we lined up for you next week? Carolina had forgotten about those. I can do phone interviews, she said, or reschedule them. You really like him, Elena observed. I do, Carolina said softly. And it's not just him. It's this place, his family, the whole lifestyle. Being here makes me realize how empty my life in the city had become. All I did was work. I didn't have time for anything else. And now? Marta asked. Carolina thought about the past few days, the quiet moments by the lake, the family dinner, the stars overhead as Davy held her hand. Now I'm starting to remember what's really important, she said. Her friends nodded, understanding in their eyes. We support you, Eleanor assured her. Whatever, you decide, even if it means not coming back to the city, Carolina asked. Marta reached across the table to squeeze her hand. Even then, we just want you to be happy. Later, as Carolina lay in bed, she thought about the choice ahead of her. Stay in Vale Sereno and explore this connection with Davy, or return to the city and the life she'd always known. It should have been a difficult decision, but somehow it wasn't. For the first time in years, the path forward seemed clear. The next morning, Carolina hugged her friends goodbye as they loaded their suitcases into a taxi that would take them to the bus station. Call us, Marta instructed. Every day. We want updates. I will, Carolina promised. And thank you both for dragging me here, for understanding why I'm staying. For everything. That's what friends are for, Elena said, hugging her tightly. Be happy, Carolina, you deserve it. After they left, Carolina tidied the cabin and packed a small backpack for her hike with Davy. At exactly 9 o'clock, his truck pulled up outside. Carolina's heart skipped a beat at the sight of him, tanned, smiling, impossibly handsome in a simple t-shirt and jeans. Good morning, he called as she stepped onto the porch. Ready for an adventure? Carolina smiled, feeling lighter than she had in years. More than ready, she replied. As they drove away from the cabin, Carolina realized that the wrong turn that had led her into Davy's cornfield maze had been the best wrong turn of her life. She didn't know exactly where this path would lead, but for the first time in a long time she was excited to find out. The day stretched ahead of them, full of promise. A hike through the woods, a picnic by a waterfall, and maybe, just maybe, the beginning of a whole new life. The waterfall was even more beautiful than Davy had described. Water cascaded down a series of rock formations, creating a natural pool at the bottom, surrounded by lush greenery. The sound of rushing water filled the air, and rainbows formed in the mist where sunlight hit the falls. This is incredible, Carolina said, taking in the scene. How did I not know places like this existed? Davy smiled, setting down the backpack, containing their lunch. Most people don't venture this far into the woods. It's about 3 miles from the nearest road. They'd spent the morning hiking through the forest, Davy pointing out different plants and trees, telling stories about growing up in these woods. Carolina had listened, enchanted by both the natural beauty around her and the man showing it to her. Are you hungry? Davy asked, unfolding a blanket on a flat rock near the pool. Starving, Carolina admitted. The hike had given her an appetite. She rarely felt in the city. Davy unpacked their lunch, homemade sandwiches, fresh fruit, and a thermos of lemonade, all prepared by Elena that morning. They ate in companionable silence, watching the play of light on the water. I've been thinking, Carolina said finally, setting down her sandwich. That sounds dangerous, Davy teased. Carolina smiled. Maybe it is. I've been thinking about what your uncle said last night about the local newspaper. Davy's expression turned serious. What about it? I'd like to meet the editor, Carolina said. Not because I'm looking for a job necessarily, but I'd like to see the paper, maybe pitch an article while I'm here. What kind of article? Carolina gestured to the waterfall. This, Vale Sereno, the Harvest Festival. Things tourists might want to know about when they visit. She shrugged. It would give me a chance to write again, even if it's just one piece. Davy nodded slowly. I think that's a great idea. I know Carlos, the editor. He's a good man, always, looking for fresh perspectives. Do you think he'd meet with me? Carolina asked. I'm sure he would, Davy replied. We could go see him tomorrow if you want. I'd like that, Carolina said. She hesitated, then added, I called the cabin rental office this morning. They had a cancellation, so I can stay for another 2 weeks. The smile that spread across Davy's face made her heart skip. 2 more weeks. Carolina nodded. If that's okay with you. It's more than okay, Davy said, reaching for her hand. It's perfect. After lunch, they swam in the clear, cool water of the pool. Carolina had borrowed a swimsuit from Elena. It was a bit big, but Davy didn't seem to mind. He taught her how to dive from a low rock into the deepest part of the pool, his hands steady on her waist as he guided her. In the late afternoon, they reluctantly packed up and began the hike back. Carolina found herself wishing the day would never end. Being with Davy was so easy, so natural. There was none of the pretense she'd grown used to in her relationships in the city. What are you thinking about? Davy asked as they walked. his, hand finding hers on the narrow trail. How different this is from what I'm used to, Carolina admitted. In the city, everything is rush, rush, rush. Nobody takes the time to just be. Davy nodded. That's what I love about this place. The rhythm is different. You move with the seasons, not against them. It must be nice, Carolina said softly. Having roots, knowing exactly where you belong. Davy glanced at her. You could have roots too. You know, if you wanted them. The words hung between them, loaded with meaning neither was quite ready to put into words. Carolina squeezed his hand but didn't respond. It was too soon for such thoughts, wasn't it? When they reached Davy's truck, the sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. Carolina was pleasantly tired from the day's activities, her muscles aching in a satisfying way. Hungry? Davy asked as they drove back toward town. Starving again? Carolina admitted with a laugh. There's a little restaurant in town that makes the best grilled trout you've ever tasted, Davy suggested. The fish comes straight from the river that feeds our waterfall. Sounds perfect, Carolina agreed. The restaurant was small and rustic, with checkered tablecloths and candles in wine bottles. The owner greeted Davy by name and showed them to a quiet table in the corner. Everyone knows you here, Carolina observed after they'd ordered. Davy shrugged. Small town, everyone knows everyone. And what are they thinking now? Carolina asked, gesturing subtly to the curious glances they were receiving from other diners. How about you being here with me? Davy smiled. They're thinking I'm the luckiest man in Vale Sereno. Carolina felt her cheeks flush. Be serious. I am being serious, Davy insisted. But if you want the truth, they're probably wondering who the beautiful city woman is, and if she's going to break my heart when she leaves. The word sent a pang through Carolina's chest. Is that what you're wondering too? Davy's eyes met hers, warm and steady. I'm trying not to think about you leaving at all. The honesty in his voice touched something deep inside Carolina. She reached across the table and took his hand. I'm not thinking about leaving either, she admitted. Not yet. Their dinner arrived, perfectly grilled trout with roasted vegetables and fresh bread. The food was simple but delicious, and Carolina found herself savoring every bite. This is amazing, she said. I eat at expensive restaurants all the time in the city, but nothing tastes like this. That's because everything here is local, Davy explained. The fish was swimming in the river this morning. The vegetables came from farms less than 10 miles away. Food tastes different when it doesn't have to travel. Carolina thought about her usual meals, takeout containers eaten at her desk, frozen. Dinners heated up after a long day. Expensive restaurant meals with clients where she was too stressed to enjoy the food. I don't think I've really tasted food in years, she said sadly. Davy squeezed her hand. Then we'll have to make up for lost time while you're here. After dinner, they walked through the quiet streets of Vale Sereno. The small town was charming at night, with string lights hung between buildings and the sounds of music drifting from the town square, where a few couples were dancing to a local band. Dance with me, Davy asked, nodding toward the square. Carolina hesitated. I'm not very good. Neither am I, Davy admitted with a smile. But that's not really the point, is it? He led her to the edge of the square and took her in his arms. The band was playing a slow romantic song, and other couples swayed around them. Carolina relaxed into Davy's embrace, letting him guide her in simple steps. See? Not so bad, he murmured, his breath warm against her ear. Carolina rested her, head on his shoulder, breathing in his now familiar scent of earth and pine. Not bad at all, she agreed. They danced for several songs, lost in each other and the music. Carolina couldn't remember the last time she'd felt this content, this present in a moment. Later, as Davy drove her back to the cabin, Carolina found herself memorizing every detail. The way the moonlight silvered the fields they passed, the sound of crickets through the open windows, the warm pressure of Davy's hand on hers. At the cabin door, Davy kissed her goodnight, a slow, sweet kiss that left her breathless. I'll pick you up at 10 tomorrow, he said. We can go see Carlos at the newspaper. Carolina nodded, reluctant to let him go. Thank you for today. It was perfect. Davy touched her cheek gently. Sleep well, Carolina. As she watched his truck drive away, Carolina felt a mixture of emotions she couldn't quite name. Happiness, certainly, but also a growing fear that whatever was happening between them couldn't last. In 2 weeks, she was supposed to return to the city, to real life. But what if real life was here with Davy? The next morning, Davy took Carolina to the offices of the Vale Sereno Gazette. The newspaper operated out of a small building on the town's main street, with large windows displaying front pages from significant moments in the town's history. Carlos Oliveira, the editor, was a man in his 60s with salt and pepper hair and wire-rimmed glasses. He greeted Davy warmly and turned to Carolina with curious eyes. "So you're the city girl who got lost in Luisa's maze," he said, shaking her hand. "News travels fast in Vale Sereno." "Apparently," Carolina replied with a smile. "It's nice to meet you, Mr. Oliveira." "Carlos, please," he insisted, gesturing for them to sit. "Davy tells me you have some experience in writing." "I studied journalism in college," Carolina explained. "I had an internship at a small paper before I switched to marketing." Carlos nodded, leaning back in his chair. "And what brings you to my office today? Just curiosity or something more?" "I'd like to write an article," Carolina said directly. "About Vale Sereno, the harvest festival, the natural beauty of the area. I'm staying for another 2 weeks and I thought it might be a nice way to use my time." Carlos studied her for a moment. "We don't have much of a budget for freelancers," he warned. "I'm not asking for money," Carolina assured him. "Consider it a guest column." Carlos's eyebrows rose. "A marketing executive offering to write for free. Now that's interesting," Carolina smiled. "I'm between jobs at the moment, and sometimes it's nice to do something just because you love it, not because it pays well." Something in Carlos's expression softened. "I understand that feeling all too. Well, I could have moved to a bigger paper years ago, made more money, but I love this town, this little paper." He nodded decisively. "All right, Ms. Brando. Write me an article about Vale Sereno from a visitor's perspective. If it's good, I'll publish it." "Thank you," Carolina said, genuinely pleased. "When would you need it by?" "Our next issue goes to print next Friday," Carlos said. "Can you have something for me by Wednesday?" "Absolutely," Carolina promised. As they left the newspaper office, Carolina felt a spark of excitement she hadn't experienced in years. A chance to write again, to create something meaningful rather than just selling products no one really needed. "Thank you for arranging that," she told Davy as they walked back to his truck. "I didn't do anything," Davy protested. "Carlos was. Impressed by you, not me." "Still, thank you for believing I could do it," Carolina said. Davy smiled. "I believe you can do anything you set your mind to, Carolina." The next week passed in a blur of activity. Carolina split her time between exploring Vale Sereno for her article and helping Davy on the farm. She interviewed local business owners, hiked to scenic spots with Davy as her guide, and attended community events. In the evenings, they would often have dinner with Davy's family or at the small restaurant in town. Carolina found herself falling into the rhythm of Vale Sereno, waking with the sun and feeling pleasantly tired by nightfall. She spoke with her friends in the city every few days, but the urgency to return was fading. When Marta mentioned job interviews, Carolina found herself making excuses to postpone them. "Are you ever coming back?" Eleanor asked during one phone call, her tone gentle but concerned. "Of course I am," Carolina replied automatically, but even as she said it, she wasn't sure if it was true. The article came together easily, the words flowing in a way they never had when she was writing marketing copy. She wrote about the magic of the Cornfield maze where she'd gotten lost, the breathtaking waterfall hidden in the woods, the warmth of the community that had welcomed her. Between the lines was the story of a woman finding something she hadn't known she was looking for. When she submitted it to Carlos, he read it while she waited nervously in his office. "This is good," he said finally, looking up at her. "Really good. You have a way of making the reader feel like they're right there, with you." "Thank you," Carolina said, relief washing over her. "In fact," Carlos continued, "it's so good that I'd like to offer you a job." Carolina blinked in surprise. "A job?" Carlos nodded. "We've been looking for a features writer for months, someone to cover local stories, human interest pieces, that sort of thing. He leaned forward, his expression serious. It wouldn't pay what you're used to in the city. Not even close. But it would be real writing, meaningful work. Carolina's mind raced. A job in Vale Sereno? Could she really consider it? I don't know what to say, she stammered. You don't have to decide now, Carlos assured her. Think about it. Talk it over with Davi. My offer stands whether you take it or not. Carolina nodded, thanking him again before leaving the office in a daze. She found Davi waiting for her outside, leaning against his truck. How did it go? He asked eagerly. He's going to publish it, Carolina said. He offered me a job. Davy's eyes widened. A job? Here in Vale Sereno? Carolina nodded. As a features writer for the Gazette. A smile spread across Davy's face, but he quickly tempered it. What did you tell him? That I needed time to think, Carolina replied honestly. It's a big decision, Davy. He nodded, taking her hands in his. Of course it is. I understand. But Carolina could see the hope in his eyes, the future he was already imagining, a future with her in it. Can we go somewhere to talk, she asked. Davy nodded. I know just the place. He drove them to the lake on his property, the place he'd shown her that first day. It was peaceful in the late afternoon, the water still and reflecting the blue sky above. They sat on the dock, shoulders touching, both lost in thought. What are you thinking? Davy asked finally. Carolina sighed. That I'm at a crossroads, and I don't know which way to turn. Tell me about the paths, Davy said gently. One leads back to the city, Carolina said. Back to the life I've known. Marketing jobs, my apartment, my friends. It's familiar and safe in its way. And the other path? Carolina turned to look at him. The other path leads here, to Vale Sereno, to a job that pays half what I used to make, to a place where I have no apartment, no history. She paused. To you. Davy's eyes were steady on hers. And which path scares you more? The question caught Carolina off guard. She'd been thinking about safety, about practicality, but fear. They both scare me, she admitted. Going back to the city means going back to a life that wasn't making me happy. Staying here means taking a huge risk on a place, a job, a relationship that's still so new. Can I tell you what I think? Davy asked. Carolina nodded. I think you've been walking the safe path for years, and it led you to a place where you were successful but not happy. Davy took her hand. I think sometimes the scarier path is the one we're meant to take. Like getting lost in a cornfield maze, Carolina suggested with a small smile. Exactly like that, Davy agreed. Sometimes the wrong turn leads you right where you're meant to be. Carolina thought about the past 2 weeks, the peace she'd found. In Vale Sereno, the joy of writing again, the connection she felt with Davy and his family. Could she really walk away from all of that? What if it doesn't work out, she asked, voicing her deepest fear. What if I take the job, move here, and then we realize this was just a vacation romance? Davy considered her words. I can't promise. You that won't happen, he said honestly. I can't see the future, but I can tell you what I feel right now in this moment. What's that? Carolina asked softly. That I'm falling in love with you, Davy said simply. That when I think about my future, I see you in it. That the thought of you leaving makes me feel like someone's cutting out my heart. Tears welled in Carolina's eyes at the raw honesty in his voice. I'm falling in love with you too, she whispered. Davy pulled her close, his arms strong around her. Then maybe that's your answer, he murmured against her hair. Carolina closed her eyes, letting herself imagine a life in Vale Sereno, writing for the local paper, living in a small house with a garden, being part of this community, being with Davy. It was so different from the life she'd planned, but maybe that was the point. I need to go back to the city, she said finally. Davy stiffened in her arms. Oh, Carolina pulled back to look at him. Not permanently, she clarified. I need to go back to pack up my apartment, to see my friends, to tie up loose ends. If I'm going to start over here, I need to properly end things there. The hope that bloomed on Davy's face made her heart swell. So you're considering taking the job, staying in Vale Sereno? Carolina nodded. More than considering. I want to try, Davy. I want to see if what we have is real, if this place could really be my home. Davi's smile was like sunshine breaking through clouds. "When would you go back to the city?" "After my 2 weeks are up," Carolina said. "I'd need a week or so to pack everything, give notice on my apartment." "And then you'd come back?" Davi asked, still sounding like he couldn't quite believe it. "And then I'd come back," Carolina confirmed. "If you'll have me," Davi laughed, pulling her close again. "If I'll have you, Carolina, I'd welcome you with open arms every day for the rest of my life." The certainty in his voice made Carolina's doubts fade away. This was right. It might be scary, it might be risky, but it was right. The next 2 weeks were the happiest of Carolina's life. During the days, she explored every corner of Vale Sereno, sometimes with Davy, sometimes on her own. She helped out on the farm, learning about crops and animals, getting her hands dirty in a way that felt surprisingly satisfying. In the evenings, she spent time with Davi and his family, feeling more and more like she belonged with them. Helena taught her to cook traditional dishes, and Miguel showed her how the farm's accounts were managed. Luisa invited her to help plan next year's cornfield maze, joking that they should design it in the shape of 2 hearts. "You've brought my brother back to life," Luisa told her one afternoon as they sketched maze designs. "I haven't seen him this happy in years." "He's done the same for me," Carolina admitted. The night before she was set to return to the city, Davy took her back, to the hilltop where they'd first kissed. The stars were just as magnificent as she remembered, a canopy of light stretching endlessly above them. "I have something for you," Davi said as they sat on the blanket he'd spread out. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. Carolina's heart raced as he handed it to her. "It's not what you think," he said quickly, seeing her expression. "Open it." Carolina lifted the lid to find a small silver key on a simple chain. "It's a key to my cottage," Davy explained. "I want you to have a place to come back to. A home if you want it." Carolina's eyes filled with tears. "Davi, I'm not asking you to move in with me right away," he clarified. "I know we're still getting to know each other, but I want you to know that when you come back, there's a place for you here, with me." Carolina slipped the chain around her neck, the key resting against her heart. "It's perfect," she whispered. "Thank you." Davi pulled her close, his lips finding hers in a kiss that promised a future together. Under the vast starry sky, Carolina felt something she hadn't felt in years, a sense of belonging, of coming home. The city felt different when Carolina returned. The noise, the rush, the crowds, it all seemed more jarring than before. Her apartment, which she'd once thought stylish and comfortable, now felt cold and impersonal compared to the warmth of Davy's cottage. Her friends noticed the change in her immediately. "You're really doing this, aren't you?" Marta asked as they helped Carolina pack her belongings. "Moving to Vale Sereno?" Carolina nodded, carefully wrapping a framed photo of her parents. "I am. I've already accepted the job at the newspaper." "And Davi?" Elena asked. "Are things serious?" Carolina touched the key that hung around her neck. "Yes," she said simply. "They are." Her friends exchanged looks that Carolina couldn't quite read. "What?" she asked. "We're happy for you," Marta assured her. "It's just a big change, a small town, a new job, a new relationship. We want to make sure you're doing this for the right reasons." Carolina put down the book she was packing and faced her friends. "I know it seems sudden," she admitted, "and maybe it is. But being in Vale Sereno, I felt more like myself than I have in years. The writing job might not pay much, but it's work I care about. And Davi," she smiled, "Davi makes me happier than I ever thought possible." "Then we support you," Eleanor said firmly. 100%. "Although we're going to miss you like crazy," Marta added, wiping away a tear. Carolina hugged them, both. "I'll miss you too, but Vale Sereno is only a few hours away. You can visit any time, and I'll come back to the city sometimes." "You better," Elena warned, "or we'll come kidnap you." The week passed quickly as Carolina packed her life into boxes. She donated most of her corporate wardrobe, keeping only casual clothes that would be practical for her new life. She gave notice on her apartment, forwarded her mail, and said goodbye to former colleagues. Every night she called Davi, the sound of his voice a reminder of what waited for her in Vale Sereno. They talked about her progress packing, about his work on the farm, about their future together. "The harvest is almost complete," he told her one night. "By the time you get back, we'll be preparing the fields for winter." "Will you teach me?" Carolina asked. "Of course," Davy replied, and she could hear the smile in his voice. "You'll be a farmer in no time." On her last night in the city, Carolina stood at her apartment window, looking out at the skyline she'd once found so impressive. The lights still twinkled, the building still reached for the sky, but it no longer felt like home. Home was a small town surrounded by fields and forests. Home was a family that had welcomed her with open arms. Home was a man with earth in his boots and kindness in his eyes. Home was Davy. The bus ride to Vale Sereno seemed to take forever. Carolina watched through the window as the urban landscape gradually gave way to suburbs, then to countryside. With each mile, her excitement grew. When the bus finally pulled into the small station in Vale Sereno, Carolina's heart raced. She scanned the waiting area, looking for one face among the small crowd, and there he was. Davy stood by his truck, searching the bus windows until he spotted her. The smile that lit up his face was everything Carolina had been dreaming of during their week apart. She barely waited for the bus to stop before grabbing her bags and hurrying down the steps. Davy met her halfway, lifting her off her feet in a hug that made her laugh with joy. "You came back," he murmured against her hair. "I told you I would," Carolina replied, her arms tight around his neck. When he set her down, Davy kissed her softly, right there in the middle of the bus station, not caring who saw them. "Welcome home, Carolina," he whispered against her lips as They drove through town toward the farm. Carolina felt a sense of rightness settle over her. This was where she belonged, not in a gleaming city apartment, but here in Vale Sereno with Davy beside her and a future full of possibilities ahead. "Carlos wants you to start at the paper on Monday," Davy told her as they drove. "And my mother. Fear's planning a welcome dinner for tomorrow night." "That sounds perfect," Carolina said, her hand finding his on the seat between them. When they reached the farm, Davy drove past the main house toward his cottage. He parked and came around to open her door, a nervous smile on his face. "I made some space for you," he said as he carried her bags to the porch. "I cleared half the closet, and the spare room can be your office if you want it." Carolina touched the key around her neck. "Can I use this now?" Davy nodded, stepping back to let her approach the door. With a deep breath, Carolina slid the key into the lock and turned it. The door swung open, revealing the cozy interior she remembered. But there were changes too. Fresh flowers on the table, a new bookshelf along one wall, a comfortable-looking desk by the window. "I thought you might need a place to write," Davy explained, nodding toward the desk. "The view of the lake is nice. From there." Tears pricked Carolina's eyes at his thoughtfulness. "It's perfect," she said softly. Davy set her bags down and took her hands in his. "I know this is all happening fast," he said. "Moving here, starting a new job, us. If you need time, if you want to take things slow." Carolina silenced him with a kiss. "I don't want to take things slow," she whispered against his lips. "I want this. I want you. I want us." The smile that spread across Davy's face was like sunshine. "In that case," he said, reaching into his pocket, "I have one more thing." "For you?" He pulled out a small velvet box and Carolina's breath caught. This time, it was exactly what she thought. Davy dropped to one knee, opening the box to reveal a simple but beautiful ring with a small diamond set in silver. "I know it's soon," he said, his voice steady, despite the vulnerability in his eyes. "And I know we have a lot to learn about each other. But I also know that I love you, Carolina. I've loved you since the moment I found you lost in that maze, and I want to spend the rest of my life with you." Carolina's heart felt too full for her chest, joy spilling over in tears that streamed down her cheeks. "Carolina Brando," Davy continued. "Will you marry me?" "Not right away," he added quickly. "We can have a long engagement. Take all the time you need. But I want to know that someday you'll be my wife." Carolina couldn't speak past the lump in her throat. Instead, she nodded, a smile breaking through her tears. "Yes?" Davy asked as if he couldn't quite believe it. "Yes," Carolina managed to whisper. Yes, Davi Moreira, I will marry you. Davi slipped the ring onto her finger, then stood to pull her into his arms. As he kissed her, Carolina knew with absolute certainty that she'd made the right choice. Sometimes, the wrong turn leads you right where you're meant to be. Carolina had gotten lost in a cornfield maze, but in doing so she'd found her way home, to Vale Sereno, to a life with meaning and purpose, and to Davy's loving arms. And she was never getting lost again. The end.